Good morning and welcome to the Bernkopf Goodman webinar, The Office is Not Dead, the Post-Pandemic Workplace. Please take a moment to answer the 4 poll questions on your screen. You'll need to answer all 4 questions in order to submit. And there will be another question posted to you later in the webinar through the chat function. We'll let you know at that time when that question has been posted. At the end of the presentation, we'll have a question and answer session. Use the Q&A section on your screen to submit your questions, and our speakers will answer as many of those questions as possible. Quick reminder, the purpose of this presentation is for information only. Communication with any member of Bernkopf Goodman LLP in this forum does not establish an attorney-client relationship. Confidential or time-sensitive information should not be discussed on this forum. Hosting today, we have Bernkopf Goodman Real Estate and Business Law Partner, Eric Allon. Eric has been recognized as a thought leader in real estate, has written extensively, and has been a speaker and moderator on numerous panels, including being a TED Talk-style speaker at the Coronet Global Summit at the Heinz Auditorium. Our panel today are from the architecture and interior design firm SGA. Gable Clarke is a partner and the head of SGA's interior design practice. She's also responsible for project oversight, client relations, business development, mentoring, and firm leadership. She also spearheads HR initiatives that enhance the company culture and employee retention. Gable enjoys establishing trust with clients, developing camaraderie with industry peers and coworkers, and transforming spaces into inspiring environments. Her favorite project phase is discovery, when the team members roll up their sleeves and immerse themselves in a client's culture. Michael Schroeder, partner and director of virtual design and construction. When Fast Company selected SGA as one of the most innovative companies in 2018, the publication identified the firm's capabilities in virtual design and construction as a key differentiator in scheduling and cost certainty. Michael played an instrumental role in attaining this honor. He has led the growth and development of the practice since 2014. And Jen Gregoire, Senior Interior Designer and Associate. Jen joined SGA in 2015 because the firm's work displayed variety and innovation. No 2 projects resembled one another. Today, Jen upholds the tradition of the individualized approach by delving into the culture and specific needs of each client. She likens this process to a quote by designer Andrew Alford. "We don't start with pretty, we start with a story. Like an author writes a book, we always try to write the space first. The results are influential, tailored designs with an imaginative detailing that reflects successful problem solving." Thank you all for joining us today to discuss the future of commercial real estate and the design of office space in a COVID-19 world. Eric, let's start with you.
Thank you, Jeanette, and thank all of you for attending. The genesis of this webinar started about 2.5 years ago at an event entitled Technology in Real Estate. I was on the first panel and Michael Schroeder was on the second panel. I was impressed with Michael and we met each other, became friends. I learned a great deal from Michael, and one of the things I learned is that he was on the cutting edge, as was SGA, in relation to a continuum on design through construction and using technology. Michael was an early adopter of virtual and augmented reality and connected the stakeholders remotely to be able to work out digitally mistakes in space. To understand the significance of it, most construction projects these days, or pre-pandemic, were coming in over budget and not on schedule. Michael had been able to, working out those errors digitally, reduce mistakes in the field to 1%, and also at the same time be able to come in on schedule. Today's focus is on the office. And like the movie Back to the Future, we're going to travel back in time, but unfortunately we can't change that. But we're going to be able to look at the present and see how we can adapt, but we can create the future that we want. And focusing on the office, it will be interesting to be on that journey with the experts we have. With that, I would like to turn it over to Gable.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Jeanette. Thanks so much for having us. We're excited to be here and talk about this topic today. So this pandemic has had a profound effect on every facet of our lives, no question. As design professionals, we've been spending a lot of time over the last 12 weeks or so trying to get a handle on what the pandemic means for office space and the future of our industry. While we're currently focused on what reentry mid-pandemic looks like, we've also been spending a lot of time at SGA thinking beyond the now and beyond the short-term implications to space. Hopefully sooner than later, we'll have a vaccine, we'll have treatments, and when that day comes, what might the office look like? So whether we were prepared for it or not, most of us had to learn very quickly how to work from home. The image on the screen you're seeing there are a few of our SGA home office setups. So you can see we're getting along nicely, we're making it work. And I think it was a challenge at first for a lot of folks, but necessity is the mother of invention. So I think a lot of us have been surprised at how well we've adapted. So well for some, in fact, that Twitter announced that its employees will work from home permanently. Recently, Nationwide Insurance announced that it's closing most of their office space in favor of remote work. By one estimate, 25 to 30% of the workforce will be working from home multiple days a week by the end of 2021. So this begs the question, if working from home is working, why go back to the office at all? So in order to help us answer this question, we're going to take a little walk down memory lane to understand how we got here. Jen?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we think back to the world we used to live in before we left the office, there were some office trends that had been emerging over the past several decades. And we're going to take a step through those to frame the conversation of what that office of the future could be and should be based on the lessons we've all been learning lately. So one of the big office trends we've all lived through and experienced is the open office. And it's estimated about 70% of us are working in open offices, SGA included in that 70%, about 160 rentable square feet per person. So you think about the office landscape of your desk and shared spaces, really accounting for 160 square feet for each individual to occupy in that space. And then most of us in those open offices are in either 6x6 workstations or even benching style workstations. So, really creating that open environment. And as mentioned, when we're talking about that square footage mix, we're looking at a very heavy collaboration office. So it's not just, heads down desk space, but it's also meeting space, collaboration space. And that's really come to the forefront in offices. Now, we'd be remiss to not mention that there's also been quite a bit of backlash on the open office in the past decades. Several studies from Harvard, as well as other publications and universities about the level of distraction or unproductivity the open office can cause. So while there is a lot of great that can occur in an open office, there is also the recognition that it is not without its own shortfalls. And as mentioned, one of the big pieces of that open office is collaboration. As we've all shifted from just a basic way of working, heads down, private office, we've opened those doors to be more collaborative. The way we all work these days is more collaborative. We are as collaborative as we've ever been. You rely on a team mentality and teamwork environment to do the work that we all do. And you're seeing that as an office trend where we're starting to bleed from the meeting rooms into the open space to create those collaboration zones. And then as we've been in a war for talent, not only has the office landscape evolved to meet our work needs, it's evolved to meet the attraction and retention needs that companies have, so that we're able to go after the best talent, recruit the best talent, and keep them as employees for the long term, so that a company can really benefit. And that landscape is evolved to include spaces like that, spaces that entice people to come in, spaces that require a little bit more of a casual environment, so that you do feel the opportunity and need to stay there longer. You do feel ownership of your space. So those are the trends we've really been seeing in the past several years, and we as designers have been implementing for a bunch of our clients. And just to give you a snapshot again of where we've been to frame that conversation of where we're going.
Jen, what I would like to mention in that regard is that Korn Ferry has indicated that the fight for talent is going to intensify over the next decade. We'll be talent short, they say in a study, 85 million people, and in the United States, 8 million. So each of us in our own industry is looking for talent and to retain it. So to be able to capture that in the future, the designs that you're working on play a key role.
Yeah, I think that, and as we dive deeper into the presentation, we could touch on it some more, but that coupled with the idea that we can open those boundaries of where we look for talent beyond our actual region in which we reside as companies. You can start to look further if you're introducing more remote work. I think that expands your ability and your reach for talent beyond just your local economy, which could be beneficial in that regard.
All right, so here we are today in the pandemic office. So today we're focused quite a bit on making short-term adjustments to all of our existing environments in order to allow employees to feel comfortable and safe. So many companies are currently mid reentry or taking part in a phased reentry. So we're trying to evaluate how we can accommodate that with the settings that we already have. So we've been working with a lot of clients to create plans similar to the one you see in front of you, which illustrate everything from seating plan adjustments to the introduction of graphics and one-way circulation patterns and things of that nature. But again, these are short-term interventions, and we're excited today to talk about what are the long-term opportunities. So this brings us to the disruptor. So without COVID-19 as a disruptor, the familiar and fairly recent ways of working would still be in effect. Office design would evolve surely, but likely in a much, much slower manner. So we're asking ourselves this: beyond the pandemic, beyond the short-term space adjustments we're currently making, what is the opportunity here? And we do see it as a real opportunity to rethink the office. Jen?
Absolutely. So with that, everyone should have a screen pop up right now as part of the chat function, where we're asking you to dream with us and answer with a one-word statement about what you think the office of the future could be. So if everyone could take that moment in the chat function to respond, Jeanette will start to read a few of them live as they roll in. But again, it's this opportunity to put back those preconceived notions about what we had for the office, about what it needed to be, about what it should be, and instead think through, what could it be now that we are free of the baggage of what was once, and we've taken this time to learn a few lessons, being removed from the office, all being at home, having that distance. What have we learned? What have we learned that's essential? What have we learned that we need from space? How can we support ourselves in a work environment? So how can space support that? Again, just a quick response on what you think that vision of the future could be for the office.
So we have some interesting responses. Inspirational, flexible, a spa, I like that one. Safe, a place where we could support each other in many aspects, not just work. Clean, providing for health and creativity benefits. Outside, larger, more spacious cubes. A resource, inclusive, collaborative.
Those are wonderful. And honestly, that's exactly where we're thinking too, that the office needs to evolve to be inspiring. So again, really thinking through that this is truly an opportunity for all of us. I know we've all heard, as Gable mentioned, the idea of reentering and the scariness that surrounds this change and how we enter into a safe work environment. And that's certainly a conversation to be had. But here today, it's past that. So what is that vision? What can excite us about going back to work? We've put together a few slides to articulate really where we see those opportunities being. One of them, as again, one response had said, inspiring. We really translate that into the office becoming a destination. You want to have an inspiring workplace to actually show up to. Recently, I was chatting with a CEO where he is looking for new office space and had asked, if people don't need to come into the office, why would they? And that's, I think, an answer that all of us are asking. Why would they come into the office? If I can work from home, I don't need to be there. But the reality is we are social. We do need to be with other people. We do need to connect with other people to do collaborative work, which the majority of us do. And if we need to have that connection, then when I come to the office, it shouldn't be the place where I feel uninspired. It shouldn't be the place where I feel that I'm not supported to do my work. So really thinking through in a bigger way than we have in the past, because we've always thought of the office as a destination, but thinking through in a more robust way that the office truly needs to be a place that is the beacon that I want to go to, that supports how I work, the company culture, and everything about it. So almost as if it's more so than ever the mothership that I find as the spark for how I do my best work. And then just taking that a little bit further, if it's the destination, what is there? And we've talked a little bit early on in the open office area where we talk about we versus me space, right? The idea of we space being collaborative space and me space being my personal heads down space. If you imagine when we talked about that open office slide in a post-COVID, or sorry, pre-COVID environment, we would be maybe more equal on the we versus me. So if we are pre-COVID, my office would have a lot of desks in it, and it would also have a lot of collaboration and meeting space. If you think in the future, if I have that freedom of choice to potentially work from home, as Gable mentioned, maybe 25 to 30% of us might still be doing that to some capacity, then I may not need as much real estate for the me space. I might not need as much physical in-office heads down space. And then what does that in turn mean for the office? Could it start to be more collaboration space? And here you're just again seeing that graphic for us on how we see that shift could occur if you are allowing the office to be more we focused, more collaboration focused, and less me, because you're also factoring in that heads down is going to happen at home. To help
I would
visualize.
just mention, by the way, just to jump in as to some of the questions asked that are truly challenging is, how do we make it safe? And fortunately in this area, we have someone such as Joe Allon, who's over at the Chan School of Public Health to assist in helping to design. But the challenge in relation to the office in the building is that building safe? And will it make people comfortable? And another challenge that we face is they call the pandemic the boomer eraser, or the boomer buster. And that is that the pandemic in this case affects people 70 and above much more dramatically, and they are at risk. And will they come back to that office, and what will draw them back? So I think that the challenges with designers, particularly of office spaces, where does that office space sit? What type of building is it? Is the ventilation right? What is the hygiene? And I think that that will go to the forefront of concerns, as well as what Michael looks at, vertically integrated backbones, and what we've looked at with green and energy efficient.
Absolutely. And I think as designers experience trends occur throughout time, a big moment in time was September 11th, where, previously the security of buildings wasn't as robust. And as a change from September 11th, buildings are secure on a level they have never been before, and it's become standard design. One can imagine post-pandemic, we will have healthier buildings in a way that we've never had before, and that'll just be the way that we design. So when you talk through how do you arrive at a building, how do you inhabit a building, what safety is there, what is your HVAC system, we would imagine that all of that would be addressed as part of how we begin to do business again, just the way security has become the forefront post-September 11th. But to go back to, again, that vision, the thing I think that we're most excited about is if we are focusing more on we space in the office, if you're able to remove a portion of that focused work because you're able to do a portion of that focused work at home, and not to skip over the fact that if earlier we said the open office could be distracting, at home you can minimize that distraction, right? And you're able to do more focused heads down work. You have less interaction with people. You have less distraction from other people. So you could, in essence, eliminate some of the negativity of the open office through remote work. But then we want to make sure we layer back in that supportive, collaborative culture that the office is best for. So here you're seeing an example of what we think could be the future, where again, it is that flexible, adaptive, collaborative space. So if you imagine with us an office being a little bit more open in the sense that meeting rooms aren't necessarily completely closed, collaboration doesn't just happen in little pods sprinkled throughout, but maybe the landscape is a much more open landscape with collaboration in a grander sense. And now I, maybe on an A team or a B team, can come in and have flexible furniture that I can move around to support my work needs that day. Technology is untethered and is able to come with me and be supported in that environment. Maybe I'm no longer sitting at meeting tables just discussing items, because I can do that at home remotely. Maybe when I come to the office, it's active meeting, it's active collaboration. And so again, that workspace needs to be flexible to support that. Now you think we could have operable partitions that help, break that down if the teams needed it that day, or even screens to help delineate space. But the idea is, instead of boxing ourselves in with static walls and fixed technology, could we create that flexible, adaptive environment that supports this change in need and change in use in the space?
Jen, I think too, one thing to point out that we've gotten excited about is, you obviously as designers are very passionate about the fact that the design of a space can influence how you feel, your mood, your behavior, and your actions. And so we had a lot of fun thinking about, the mindset change that would come from leaving your house, going to a space where the focus would be pure collaboration and ideation and sparking creative ideas and working side by side with your coworkers. So already anticipating the physical difference between, wherever you're working at home or your heads down space to that active, more agile, flexible environment will put you in a headspace where you're able to, more efficiently create ideas and get excited and work with your coworkers. So that mental shift is supported by the physical environment.
Absolutely. And it should lead to greater productivity. If you're able to actually designate space for different types of work, then you're no longer trying to make one space do everything, which allows greater focus and greater productivity. I mean, there's a number of studies that support that idea. So we're seeing great opportunity there. Another piece of that puzzle, right? If we're going virtual, how do we keep that company culture alive? And while we can keep the work alive through the office, one key thing, and one actual great quote that we had found that's a real thought starter for this idea is on the screen here. And it says, look at how people typically make connections. From dating to social networks, online community building is already happening and businesses are just catching up. I think in the past, as designers, we've relied as well on the four walls to house culture. Culture being the behaviors, culture being the visual output that we do, whether it's through messaging in the interior space or branding elements, to push out this idea of this is the culture you're inheriting. Here, I'll just switch to the next slide that gives a few examples of that as well. We've used those four walls really to help guide and shape culture. But if we think about how we all exist in the world, we exist in a world in which culture is surround us and we take part in multiple factions. But when it comes to the office, we really truly have bound ourselves to those four walls. But this is an opportunity for all of us to look beyond those four walls as companies and as employees to say, how do we bridge that gap between the built environment and the digital world? And a key piece of that is technology. If we're going virtual in a way that we never have, and if we're working remotely, how do we still maintain that level of connectivity? So here you're just seeing a few examples, some inclusive of technology. I think the next thing to really touch on is if technology is at the forefront more so than ever, right now we're all connected in a way that allows us to do work through technology, but it's also the next step is the evolution of technology allowing us to be connected through culture, connected through the social aspect of work in a way that, again, we just relied on space.
Jen, what I think in part you're saying is that our concept of what an office is changing. And that in fact, the catchphrase used to be space as a service. But if we think of the office in an expanded term, an expanded concept of being both virtual space and office space, and then try to connect those, then the concept of office expands and space as a service expands as well. And the role of technology is key to that, which I know we'll come to later with Michael.
Yeah, absolutely. And before I steal from Michael here, because he'll talk much more in depth on technology, the other piece that we have to recognize is if we are going to have a remote population and an in-person population, then an in-person meeting no longer means face-to-face. So in that regard, technology has to be there to support and equal the playing field between those who are remote at a meeting and those who are in person at a meeting. So the technology right now supports us. We're sort of all equal right now. We're all remote in this meeting, and every one of us is treated with equality in terms of our viewer and interaction experience. But as soon as we re-enter the workforce and a portion of us are in person and a portion of us are not, the technology really needs to come up to support that use in a way that we don't currently have.
Yeah, that's right. And I'll just jump in here for a minute. I think technology, needs to support effective work. And as we look at this image, you see people that are writing, on a piece of paper, they're looking passively at the screen. perhaps there's much more interaction happening virtually in the virtual environment. People need to be working in a perhaps on spreadsheets or in in a virtual environment, and are also documenting what they're doing, and that has to have a nice continuous flow between the people who are participants who are in an office, let's say working together physically, and those virtual participants as well. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see that in order to align, these groups of people who are working from home or working at the office, we have to recognize that there are different times in which people are available in the office and in this new space that we're talking about within the office. So we have a zone, we call it a co-location opportunity, that overlaps the time where people are available who are working at home and those who are available working in this collaborative office space environment. And some folks may get up very early in the morning and be very productive, extremely early, 5 o'clock in the morning, maybe 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock. And that may be an opportunity for them to get some productive hours in on the day. And they may stop midday. They may have to do some activities. And so technology needs to support the fact that people we need to identify how people work throughout the day. So it's time and space we have to accommodate here. And so one way to think about that is through this co-location idea. And here we're thinking that there's an opportunity to do what's called virtual co-location. In design and construction, I help design and construction teams work together and work shoulder to shoulder, so to speak. And we maximize the ability for people to affect the decision, affect decisions on the project. So if a decision is made, how do we get that implemented as soon as and effectively as possible by minimizing the roadblocks that occur between making a decision and making it a reality. And our tools are designed to help support that. And there's no difference here. We will have to align technology and all of the various tools that we use to work throughout the day in a way that is seamless. And so I'd like to call that like a co-location team. So if you look at this slide, on the top, we have various modes of interaction with technology. We have face-to-face communication traditionally, where you're in the same space, all the way on the left, where you see someone working in a virtual environment, right? And they may be in a home office somewhere, or they may be, they may not even, they're not be at their home, they may be somewhere else. Maybe there's a virtual co-location space available for them. And there's everything in between. And we need to understand how these tools connect to each other, the information, the backbone, as we call it underneath, to support the sort of shared interactions. And so in order to make this efficient with our co-location teams, we set up what are called project dashboards. And project dashboards sort of create a common entry point for all the various tools that people use, from physical space down to the virtual space. So on the right, we have shared physical space, but on the left, we have shared virtual space. And we're going to see an evolution in virtual technology that will help, I think, everyone become much more immersive immersed in the environment together. So if you imagine today, we're putting on these big heavy goggles, right, Eric? And you see these people that, like, perhaps the goggle is even connected to a computer, that's running underneath your desk, and you can't walk around without tripping over this cable that's connected. It's very cumbersome. And I like to use the analogy of a cell phone, or the early phones are corded, right? You could only go so far before you get strangled by the kitchen phone. And then you have this big giant cell phone, this block, this brick you'd be carrying around, and that was the greatest technology. That's sort of where we're at today with virtual reality and virtual technology. So that headset that you see is very clunky and heavy and connected. That becomes very light and ephemeral and and wireless. And essentially the technology, the physical technology goes away. The virtual technology is where you're, and that interaction is going to take place in a much more seamless and lightweight fashion.
Michael, I think that one of the things that's interesting about real estate is that as a group, the real estate industry has been laggards to adopting technology, and COVID-19 accelerated what was starting to be an interest of those in the real estate business to saying, you know, we have to adopt technology both with data and in every other aspect. And when you talk about virtual and augmented reality and saying that it's the beginning of it, it's kind of interesting to stretch our minds to think what you mean by that. Is it that we can all, in essence, put the headsets on and be in a room together?
Well, I think you're going to see both, right? The office space will be available for this highly interactive, participant-driven experience where you're engaging with maybe, you know, tens of people who are not in the room, and absolutely we're almost, it feels like you're in the same room, right? And if we're using the same information and we're manipulating the same data underneath with our applications, we're able to create effective work modes within these tools, and not just passively. You know, today we watch a presentation and we're kind of passive. It washes over us like a television series would, you know, Netflix. It just kind of, you just consume that. Whereas in the future, you're much more interactive with the technology. They have gesture and hand controls, as you can see on the left. That allows you to actually manipulate the virtual environment as opposed to just be a passive recipient of it. And that allows for all new sorts of work modes. We see it in the game environment. There are lots of gaming technologies that are quite interesting and highly interactive today. Most of the younger generation most of them are gamers. And you see that you see how passionate they are about their games and about their friends online that they meet. We're going to see similar types of passionate interactions that occur within a virtual work environment.
And Michael, if that occurs, you know, there's a lot of controversy right now in the real estate industry about will the office shrink. 69% of respondents to the Coronet study with executives says we're going to use less space. And as Gable mentioned at the outset, that's partly a trend. But will it be less space, or will it be the same space with more room in it between employees? Because as we talked about earlier, and that was raised by one of the respondents, you know, safe, healthy is a key concern. How do we do that? And so it is a challenge for office landlords to figure out how to make their space attractive, and with the understanding that certain trends will continue. The length of leases will come down. So what can they do? What's the cost of doing it? And what in relation to design a space is going to happen? And when you take the virtual world and make it feel more real, that's going to have an effect on less space, I believe.
I believe you're right. We'll have, there'll be a balance because you'll have almost infinite virtual space, but the actual physical space becomes the anchor point, right?
Yes.
For your organization. It becomes that is the amenity in a sense. It is the entire office. And that I think where businesses can understand their relationship to their culture and they can bring it into a physical space, that amenity tied to a tightly coupled virtual space will create a compelling reason to come to that company, right? To attract new talent.
And that's the core issue, is how do you attract talent, and what's the role of that mothership office as opposed to the home satellite offices?
Right.
Yeah, and Eric, I would just layer in, you know, as designers, we constantly hear from our clients that they need and want more meeting and collaboration space. They need and desire more amenity space, but those spaces come at a premium, a square footage premium. And the reality is they have so many bodies to fit into a space. So if you think about how we've been designing offices, the space for the people comes first, and then the space for the extra functions, the amenity, the meetings comes secondary. And we're constantly chipping away at those numbers below maybe the original ideal numbers for meeting rooms or seats in meeting rooms to fit the bodies at desks. But if you do get that freedom to say a portion of my population is remote, I now do no longer have to be beholden to fitting in a certain number of bodies. There's now a new strategy at play for how you actually bring your employee population into the space. So maybe the square footage does decrease, or maybe the square footage is reallocated to a different use category within the office that has previously been the portion that has been downsized to accommodate individual work.
And I think that the comment that came from Beth Llewellyn of one word, flexibility, you have to listen to the clients and see what they need most, what's going to fit into their culture, what they're doing, and how do you design it to meet it. So it's flexibility on your end and listening, and it's not one environment is the same for every type of company.
This is absolutely not a one size fits all. This is an opportunity for each company to understand what's been working for them, what hasn't been working for them, and take those new insights and think about how they'll translate them into their space. It is certainly not, this is an office trend that will sweep every single one of us. This is an office moment for us to evaluate what is and is not working.
Yeah, I would say too, I think everything has been upended over the last several weeks. And I think, if you had polled people ahead of time and said, how effectively can your workforce work from home? The answers would probably differ greatly than how they might answer that today. And speaking of which, I'm curious, Jeanette, to check in with you on some of our poll questions to see if we have some interesting answers that would play into the conversation here.
We do, actually. I'll just go through the 4 that were asked. The first one, what do you miss most about working in the office? 75% being around people, 9% access to technology, 15% work-life boundaries, and then 3% other. Are you more efficient and productive working from home than you expected to be? Almost 60% yes, 12% no, and then about 30% about what I expected. And before the work from home mandate, how likely were you to turn on your video for conference calls? 53% not likely, 32% somewhat likely, 15% very likely. Since working from home, are you more likely or less likely to turn on your video for conference calls? 88% yes, more likely, and 12% no, not more likely.
You know what's so interesting is the society one. I mean, the social one at the beginning, because COVID-19 keeps us apart. And it's anti what we are as people. We want to get together, and how difficult that is for us. And yet the answer to the second question is we're very efficient at home. It appears most people find that. So that balance that you're talking about is the reason to get together and see each other, to maintain that culture in person, is very critical to most of us. And I believe that it's going to cause a generational split until a vaccine is found that's effective for more than a short time. Fauci has mentioned that it may be just a short time, but it's going to be a split because the younger people will come back earlier thinking the risk is lower than those of us who are older. And it goes to that other question that came up earlier about safe. What is your degree of feeling safe mattering on your age and your proclivity to being susceptible to COVID-19's negative impact on you? Some people have none, but others have conditions that are very susceptible. And what does that have on your role as architects? Is it, are we near the conclusion? Is that you, Gable?
I think so, and then we'd be happy to take some Q&A. But essentially, our thought is that the office isn't dead, it's evolving. The office itself has always been very responsive. It's been responsive to everything from changes in technology, to the cost of real estate, to generational impacts. And so we really feel that this has allowed us an opportunity to reevaluate our old ways of thinking in order to help shape the office of the future. So with that.
Well, one of the things I wanted to do is say to you, all of you, thank you so much. We're going to open it up to questions and answers, but you took us back into the future, which is what you promised to do, and the journey's been a pleasure. I would only say that Jeff Bezos said to his investors that it's always day one. And I think we all need to believe it's day one. That is, if we aren't laser focused on the customer, whoever our customers are, or those, or our employees, to make sure that we retain them, then people are going to pass us by. We're going to lose our employees. We need to be current. And our tendency also is to embrace the status quo, and we have to fight that. We have to wake up and embrace change. And you've taken us during a very dark time, the pandemic, to see a future that could be very bright and opportunistic for all of us. And the opportunities are endless. And with that, I would turn it back to Jen. And again, thank you all. Jeanette, I meant, not Jen, Jeanette.
So a reminder, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If you would like to ask a question, please use that button to submit. First question we have, if a vaccine is discovered, will that change the game? Do you think owners, CEOs, principals will request the return to the office?
That's an interesting question. I think, you know, as we've heard even from the poll here today, everybody is really eager to see each other again and to interact. And I think there's a real recognition that great work happens in person because, you know, it's those, you know, collision points in the pantry when you're getting a cup of coffee and you run into somebody and you start to chat about something and ideas formulate. And although we can orchestrate those to some degree while we're in the digital world, those chance interactions I think are so fruitful and, you know, really inspirational to folks. So I think, you know, I feel strongly that, you know, being around my coworkers and clients and industry peers sparks that creativity and really that idea generation. So I think like everything else, it's a balance. There's a time and place and a need for heads down work where you need to be focused and siloed. And we can find a place for that to happen, whether it's at home or whether it's, you know, at some area of the workplace. But the greater need is for those opportunities to collaborate and stand shoulder to shoulder and use the whiteboard, or for us, you know, sketching on plans and creating ideas. And those things need a physical environment to support that. So I definitely think it will be a hybrid approach. And for us, again, we're just excited to see how we can create space that supports that. Whether you're a law firm or an architecture and design firm, what that looks like might vary somewhat, but it's really, you know, our job as professionals to help draw that out of you. And I think, you know, over the next 6 to 8 months or so, we're probably going to be spending a lot of time with clients kind of hitting the reset button and saying, okay, now that we've all lived through this, what have you learned as an organization that's going to help you move forward in a positive way? And how can we help you get there?
And I think it's the effectiveness of that vaccine and how long it will be effective. If it's long lasting and will really protect you for a great length of time, I think it will have one impact. And if it's short-lived, as Fauci fears, then I think we're going to have another entry. And it matters how quickly we put the pandemic into a spot we can deal with. And that's a concern.
Yeah, I would say too, I think, you know, a lot of it has to do with this has kind of caused us all to you know, pause and realize that, you know, this took us by surprise. We had to react to it. It was a very unfortunate reality, and I think the memory of that is not going to go away anytime soon. So, you know, Jen had alluded to 9/11, and there was certainly a very strong pendulum swing right after 9/11 with regard to security and things of that nature. And you can see all these years later, you know, we still have a lot of that still in place, right? So I think the memory of how we could be caught off guard and some of the health implications and how our buildings and our environments play into that, you know, we're not gonna forget that quickly. So I think that will permeate and we'll have higher expectations with regard to space. I think they might, you know, evolve over time, certainly when we have a vaccine and a treatment that we're comfortable with. But I think a lot of those tenets will still, you know, permeate, you know, and that expectation for healthier buildings and better HVAC systems and things of that nature, I think will live beyond that, as well as the reliance on technology that we have. But I'd be curious to hear what Michael and Jen have to say about that as well. Oh, Michael, you're on mute.
Michael, you're on mute.
Yeah, I am on mute and now hopefully, but I think you know, we had a moment where I think it became required that people interact in a certain way and online. It sort of forced it to some degree. And I think it may be hard to just for everybody just to shift back, because the longer this takes place, the more people will get into a mode of working in this way, right? Working virtually. And so I don't think we're just going to go back, be able to flip a switch and say, okay, whoa, wait a minute. It was announced, you know, January 2019 again. It's not going to happen. We're going to have a new wave of folks who are entering the workplace in this way, and they're not going to be acclimated to coming into the office every day, and that also, if this takes a while for a vaccine to occur, then that will be even more the case. So, and I also think that the technology will be there to support certain types of interactions that just were only possible physically before, where you could, in virtual reality, maybe meet and spontaneously interact with folks around the virtual water cooler, in effect, right? And thereby actually creating a greater opportunity for unique connections to be formed between employees that you just couldn't get in around one water cooler, right? If someone's working in California and someone's working in New York, that was impossible unless they actually traveled together. So new opportunities for interaction as well.
Yeah, and I would just double on that and say, we're hearing from our clients that the fact that we are all virtual at the moment is actually equaling the playing field. It's allowing for more voices that usually in an in-person setting aren't able to be heard. And coupled with the fact that a large portion of our working population is a millennial population that does exist in their entire life online, except for when it comes to work. So if you start to think that you're dealing with a population of people that are starting to take over our work environment, and they're living virtually, the expectation would be, well, can't I work virtually then too? And while this moment occurred to shift all of us rather quickly, I think we would have seen this slow progression irregardless of the unfortunate event we're currently living through.
Jeanette, next question. Do you have a couple others?
It's easy for the company to rely on a shift to home-based office work, but what types of supports technology are reasonable to expect the company provide? Not everyone has the physical space to accommodate one person working in the home, let alone two. It's an intensely personal and highly subjective circumstance for each employee. Are companies oversimplifying this shift to home-based work?
And do you want to take this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, that's a very poignant question, right? And I think that each company has to answer it differently, but certainly our research and our findings, and speaking to furniture dealers as well that are layering into this, and just hearing those CEOs that we work with, it's not necessarily going to be fully prescribed. I think, you're hearing that from Facebook and Twitter that, well, they're going to switch to remote work. The reality is it doesn't have to be every single person that works there. It can be situational. So I wouldn't imagine there's a mandate that we all go work from home, except for in this particular COVID moment. But we are already starting to see that companies are recognizing that the dollar allocation they used to spend on employees in office. So if you think about the physical square footage cost of an employee in that office, that 160 we talked about earlier, the amenities you've provided for them, whether that is, a fully stocked pantry as some of our companies do, or even a kegerator that you pay for, as well as other office perks that you provide, there is a dollar allocation that is accounted for each employee. And we're starting to hear the dialogue and even seeing some instances where companies are shifting that dollar allocation to a home office setup. Furniture vendors who traditionally are thinking of outfitting an office space and your workstation, your meeting rooms, are actually putting work from home packages together. So the idea could be, in the future, if you're a remote worker, you have a remote portion of your work, does your new company drop off an office setup to you? And while that's certainly not the entire answer or entire solution, things like that are at these early stages, what's being thought about. So I can imagine that conversation will evolve and progress even further, but to think that there would be no support at home if you are, have some level of mandate to work from home, I think we'll see that companies in that race to attract talent simply can't do that. They would have to accommodate in some regard how to make you be on that level playing field with your in-office counterparts.
Jen, that's directly on point in the legal industry. I know many large firms that were caught off guard, and they've now allocated significant funds for employees to buy monitors. So they have 2 screens, to buy printers and copiers and scanners. And they've allocated it now because many of the employees went home with just a laptop, and or even partners went home. So you're right. And I'd expand it to what you were saying, which I think is true. If we think of amenities as being in the office, I think you have to also think of amenities as besides a gym, what are you going to provide to that home employee that you're providing in the workplace of a variety of types? And maybe that is another enticement to retain talent or to attract talent, is how do you benefit the home employee?
Right. And I, on a side note, I know, Eric, you and I had talked, not only do you get that desk, but, just off the cuff, does the company also give you a Peloton bike, right? And
Yeah.
it just, that dream, right? This is uncharted territory. And because companies are in a war for talent, I think you will see creative and responsive approaches to how we entice employees in a work from home setting. And that is, again, uncharted, but interesting ground to cover in the coming years.
But I do think another piece of the question was, it's really difficult for some people to set up a home office. They don't have the space, or they have children, and they become less efficient, and they need that office to be there to make a sincere break. And that was part of the question. And we have a participant who raised a question, Jeanette, before, and asked us to raise it. Doesn't childcare play a key role in relation to reentry into an office at all? When somebody wants you back in the office, don't we have to address childcare? And the Newton Chamber is directly looking at this issue. And although the governor has said childcare facilities can open, many of them can't meet the requirements that are there during this pandemic. And I think it's highlighted the critical importance of national child care. That's a key piece of either people working remotely or in the office, that you have to have that. And we have not addressed that. We're sorely deficient. Although Bright Horizons has done a great job, and others like it in small organizations, it needs to be a national focus. And Andrea Kelly, who raised that question, is right on point. Jeanette, any more questions?
That was the last one I was going to ask, so you beat me to it. And we are almost out of time. So I wanted to thank again our speakers, Gable, Jennifer, Michael. We really appreciate you taking your time. Actually, I take that back. Another question just popped up. If we could answer quickly, can the panel identify their personal ideal work environment?
Oh.
I love working at home, I have to be honest. I find myself so much more efficient. But as a lawyer, I need to have a lot of time looking, private time to think and create and understand things. And I'm able to connect with my colleagues pretty easily. So I found it, I would never have believed it would have been as possible. So without the pandemic, I'd love to come into the office to see people, but I'd be spending the majority of my time, surprisingly, in my home.
Oh, interesting. I think I personally would prefer a hybrid approach. I think, my challenge, which is similar to probably everybody here, is that, sometimes you just really need to get a proposal out the door or do some heads down work, and it's tough because there are distractions in the office. So if there was a way to kind of compartmentalize that and know that I had some guaranteed heads down time, that would be fantastic, because I think for me personally, it would free me up mentally to then have those days in the office that I knew were just, open for collaboration, for chance encounters, for, sketching and creating and visiting clients and, having those live conversations. I think, if we're talking about the dream, that would be it for me, for sure. Michael and Jen?
Yeah, I think, from my point of view, I agree with you completely there. I think it's a hybrid. I see that there might be a majority work from home opportunity that, for a lot of us, if in these sorts of industries and design profession, for instance, a lot of what I do throughout the day is building the buildings as well and working on the construction site with the team. And, you still have to be there physically and oversee some of that occur. But we're trying to coordinate all of our work virtually ahead of time. So I think there's a great opportunity for us to work, more in, and I went and grabbed, something like this, where it's a virtual headset or something. And we have the opportunity to work collaboratively in a virtual environment. So from my point of view, I think it's a hybrid, but it's a little more leaning toward majority of time at home, highly effective time within an office environment, not just time where you would be commuting and getting a cup of coffee, but really effective collaborative work environment in an office, coupled with more virtual, online, remote work.
Before Jen goes, I did want to modify that. I used to go 4 to 5 days a week to lunch with clients or colleagues, and I will continue to do that once the pandemic ends. And I miss that very much, particularly going to Dry Dock Cafe and watching Michael's building go up with related Beal. That's right there. Jen, what are your
Absolutely.
thoughts?
So I echo Michael's comments, but I'll start by saying I thought I would hate working from home. So, it was with that lens that I started working from home, thinking there was no way that was going to work for me. I was going to hate being isolated. I sort of loved the fact that as an interior designer, I am often in the office, but often running around, running to client meetings, on job sites, very active, work environment. And thought switching to work from home, sitting in a chair all day long, would be the worst thing that ever happened to me. But I have learned a surprising lesson, and it is that I am more focused, more productive. I am a better mentor to the staff that works with me. I am a better designer for my clients because I do have more focused attention time for them that previously was a little scattered because I was bouncing from meeting to meeting. So I feel that the ability to have what I thought was focus time at the office really came, and I joked in the office, I had focus time in 15-minute increments at the office because there would forever be, a staff member next to my desk asking a question. It's interesting how our protocols around interruptions have shifted in a virtual environment to being much more intentionally timed and deliberate. And that has really allowed for me to have more focus time. So I'm with Michael in saying that I think a vast majority at home, but with very targeted, intentional, productive time at the office. I don't think I could do my job without that piece.
We saw another question from James Topper, but it's going to take time to answer it. James will try to do that offline. And Jeanette, do you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, I just wanted to, again, thank all of our speakers for taking the time to present today. We appreciate it. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to Eric Allon directly or visit our website, www.bg-llp.com. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gable, Michael, and Jen. Great to do a webinar with you all.
That's my
Likewise. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Jeanette.
Thank you.
pleasure.